Hello. All right. So I'm going to be going a different angle than I usually do. I'm going to be going directly into politics with this one. And I'm going into politics for a variety of reasons. The main reason is because a lot of people don't seem to understand what's happening. They don't understand. Here, let me adjust my thing because it's kind of screwing up with me. They don't understand what's happening. They don't understand why, when it comes to birth rates, people care about it so much. Um, Case in point, something happened recently where I was at home and someone was coming door to door asking about the Harris Trump election, obviously. Um, uh, just they wanted to ask questions for my wife, but they thought it was okay for me to substitute. Which, by the way, as a statistician who used to work um, uh, at a survey company, a major one, that's a no. You're not supposed to do that. So um, the uh, the guy asked me questions anyway, and so I answered because I kind of figured what angle he was coming from. He came from a Democratic angle. He actually biased a lot of questions in how he was asking them, in that he was leading the question and he was giving suggestions for answers. Uh, and so, gosh, that's just so funny. That is so, yeah, of course. We're talking about Childfree and that's what happens. But here, like, we have a situation where the canvassers, a survey canvasser is actually asking me questions. And we get to the point of Social Security because that is a big talking point for one of the candidates in Michigan, that she's going to not cut Social Security. And I look at him and I'm just like really shocked that he brought that up. I was like, how old are you? He goes 37. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm 37 too. You really expect there to be people to support the entitlements like Medicare and Social Security? He goes, yeah, like we've been paying into it all these years. And I'm like, do you know how that works? And he's like, yeah, like it's in the taxes. And I'm like, all right, so when Social Security was established, it was established in 1935. The average the average number of children per woman was around 4. Like, that was the average. Um, Now it's 1.64. So it went above replacement. It was initially started at way above replacement, and now we're well below replacement. So we have this pyramid established in 1935, and I'm explaining to him that in 1935 we had a pyramid, like exactly what you should have in terms of the population. You have more people being born than at the very top people being alive, right? We are living longer, but like that pyramid may change shape a little bit here and there, but generally speaking, it should still be a pyramid. And I said, right now we currently have a silo, and it's starting to reverse into a upside down pyramid, which means that our tax structure is fundamentally at risk. And if we're going to tax people who, the younger generation, what they're making, we have to tax more of it to pay for the people who are older and dying. And we started talking for a little bit about that point, and it was weird because he actually listened. And then he said, like, as he was leaving, he said, you gave me something to seriously think about, because as of right now, we do have a birth rate of actually 1.62 according to the CDC. Yeah, I don't have it quite up right now, but I will in a second. 1.62 is what we have for average births per women who can have children. And so um yeah, when you canvas the canvassing. Um it is funny. But the point being, we're currently in a state that is very abnormal, and in terms of in terms of history, and it creates suicide for a society. If we don't have our birth rate under control, our society is going to collapse. And Elon Musk has brought this up several times. Like, there's going to be a population collapse. Well, of course there is. Like, it's an upside down pyramid in a lot of places. Like in Japan, that is a huge issue. And a lot of European countries have that issue, which is why one of the reasons why they brought in the refugees was to accommodate the fact that their population was not having children. And like, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, all right, you can let's promote contraception in the schools at a young age. Let's promote abortion at a young age. The domestic population will get rid of their children or prevent them from being born. And then it'll justify us for economic purposes to bring in refugees to then supplant, like, not necessarily replace, but in a sense replacing, because none of the children that should be there based off normal birthing patterns for replacement and more so are just not there. And so you have to have a labor group to tax to justify all the social safety nets. And so this creates a real problem, because now we have, again, a suicidal rate of birth in society that cannot keep up with the taxes that are needed for Medicare and Social Security. And so, like, this is one of the practical reasons why child-free is a problem. Like, as Catholics, like, there's obviously, like, as Catholics, we understand the moral reasons that if someone's getting married, like, you shouldn't be choosing child-free. That shouldn't be a choice you're utilizing, unless you're both abstaining and you have like a Josephite marriage. But like that, and that goes into a whole bunch of stuff. But just like what I wanted to present here was just because nobody's saying this. Like, nobody, like, besides Elon Musk, nobody is really saying this. And this is like really important, because this is like quite literally the bedrock of like our society in terms of just raw material, which is people. Like, we need people to exist from point to point to point. And if we continue to do what we're doing, the people aren't going to be there. We're not going to have a force of like we're not going to have the forces that we think we have. We're not going to have the money outside of just printing it because we choose to. Like, that's a problem in and of itself. But like, we don't even have like the people to pay for it. We don't have the tax structure in place. And unless we're just going to say we're going to print money to print money and that's it, that's fine, then, like, I mean, I guess the world's kind of screwed, because we're kind of stuck in this paradigm where we think that we can't have kids. Well, so before I go into that route, we are currently stuck in a problem where, because of our tax structure, we cannot justify Social Security. We cannot justify Medicare for someone like me. I'm 37. I'm middle-aged. I'm like right there. I've never expected Social Security. When I was 18, I was quite literally told by everyone in my mom's generation, don't expect this, because politicians keep kicking it down the road, and they absolutely do. But that was like half the story. The other half is that generation and the generations to now just aren't having kids. Like, I have 5 kids. So I'm not child free. Like, I'm very much like having kids. And one of the reasons that I'm very grateful that I'm practicing my faith in that capacity, because it hasn't been easy. Okay, like, it's not like I have been able to pay for everything, or I wasn't on like food stamps, or like we weren't on food stamps or whatever. Like it wasn't easy. And it's not easy, but it's the fact that like in the future, there's a very real possibility we're going to resort back to what used to be before the New Deal in 1935, which is your kids take care of you. And there's a lot of people in my generation that do not have kids and choose not to have kids. And ironically enough, they're saying that I'm the selfish one for having kids. Yet the entire tax structure that that exists to just like to set it up for them to be at least cared for a little bit when they're older completely relies on taxing other people's kids. And like you're not putting it, like that's like whenever someone says, oh, was it there used to be this idiom where it's like you're not doing your duty to society. And I think that's what it was. Your duty to society is to have kids and raise them up. And a lot of people scoff at that because they're like, well, I'm not just here to have kids or whatever. And it's like, you're right. You're not just here to have kids. And having kids is a major sacrifice. But the problem comes with the people who don't understand that if multiple people choose not to have kids, we don't have people to tax, which means that those same people who tend to be left-leaning and want those safety nets will not have those safety nets, and they will be taken away from us as a population. Like that's a real problem. And like even though they are left-leaning, like they are left-leaning safeguards, they are safeguards that we can't simply just cut off and our society's fine. Like it is a real problem to seriously cut Social Security, but it's also a real problem to not have the tax base to justify having it in the first place. And that is of the choices of those that have chosen not to have kids or to stop at like one or two. Because again, the system in place, the tax structure, even though the tax structure has been reformulated, it's been reformulated at the constraints of like one of my undergraduate degrees and focuses was on public policy and public administration. Like economics and understanding that like is not something that is new to me. I'm not ignorant of this. I studied this quite a lot. I also have a master's degree in statistics. So it's not like I'm just kind of off the cuff giving like, oh, this religious guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, no, I absolutely do know. I do know what I'm talking about. And the problem here is that there's enough of us that do know what we're talking about, and we're trying to point out the problems, but all people see is, oh, well, you're religious. That doesn't matter. Like when it comes to the taxes, like what matters is we need a tax structure in place that's sensible. And right now it's not sensible to keep Social Security with the tax structure we have in place with the population that is not there. And so like this will lead to problems later. If not already, like it's already kind of being used in like this crisis is being used to justify bringing over refugees or exactly what Europe's doing. Now, the problem with that is the fact that the culture shifts. And that's, I mean, like we're bringing in people that have a drastically different culture than us. And it fundamentally alters the way American life is. And it's not simply because they're different people, right? Like there are certain cultures that simply do not mix with, I don't want to say a laissez-faire approach, but a respectable position. I don't know how to say it without outright saying it. And so, but I think, yes, I'm just going to leave it at that. Like, next ad, on a fixed income and can't afford to lose Social Security. All right. So, but like, this is one of those aspects that is Elon Musk is the only one talking about it. And the problem with Elon Musk talking about it isn't that he's talking about it. It's that he's also talking about 10, 15 other things that are really important. Like he's talking about AI. That's a really important thing. Like I deal with it. I'm a statistician. Like AI is essentially probabilistic models put in algorithms that are just kind of let loose into what happens. Like that is a real problem to deal with as well. But we also have the very real possibility of our society imploding because we don't have people. And like I said, justifying bringing other people in to fill that gap is, I think, a fundamentally flawed option because it's going to drastically change our culture. And not in a way like I come from Polish background, like a Polish background. The people who my ancestors that came here 4 generations ago in the early 1900s. They were not. They came like through Ellis Island, and like I get like the whole like there's a group of people coming in, and there's a culture, and what if your family did it then, like why are you not doing it now? Because different cultures have different aspects to them. It's another thing entirely when you bring in other cultures that have axioms that don't match with our understanding of freedoms and are not based on Western thought. And trying to mix the two as if like you can just do that with everything is asinine. That completely lacks the nuance of culture and misses the point of a lot of debates about what we call the experiment of the United States. And so, because it is an experiment, it is still something that is very new, and it's in terms of the history of the world, and we are kind of just like pushing through some real serious problems that we have without addressing them in the right mind. So sorry for stuttering. I have to take a drink. Let's see. Right. So like just gonna go to a nursing home. So Starskim is totally owning the chat right now. If you want to come into the chat, like we can have this back and forth. But well, someone has to grow up to become your nurse, right? Like, yeah, that's the problem, is that your nurse is going to be someone who's much younger than you. And given some of the policies, like say euthanasia is now going to be like, if you look at some European countries and especially Canada, holy crap, Canada, like that is being suggested to people on an unreasonable level. Like I all euthanasia is wrong. Like, I mean, that's the Catholic position, and I agree with it. I think, but like on the additional problem with euthanasia is accidents happen. And they happen in very dire situations, like dire situations, but also in like completely normal situations. If you ever have time, I suggest you research the accidental deaths of people in Europe. They are going to shock you, because what has happened is you'll have a situation where someone is next to a patient, like you have two patients. One patient wants to be euthanized, the other does not. Came in for something that needed help, needed like surgery or something, but did not want to choose euthanasia. Well, again, like accidents happen, and sometimes the other patient gets that choice, and now he's dead. And he didn't want to die. And there's oopsies. And those are one of those oopsies you can't take back. And I know some people would be like, well, we just have to like reduce that down. It's like, no, the policy itself is inherently flawed, because it does, like, if you're against the death penalty, if you are against the death penalty, I don't know how you can justify euthanasia, because now you're opening up the probabilistic models for accidents of people dying. And the reason, and so like I'm just addressing that really quickly, because like again, it's the same people, like it's typically left-leaning people who think euthanasia should be allowed, but they're also against the death penalty. And they're against the death penalty for a variety of reasons, but one of them is that you can accidentally kill an innocent man. Well, this is quite literally the exact same thing. And nobody talks about it. Like nobody says that. Like and we know it happens. Just look at like European statistics have this. Um but like look to Canada. Look how hard they're pushing it on people. Um it's not like I'm not going to give you citations because it's really easy to find. Um so that and I kind of like didn't bring the citations with me. So I'm going to be honest with that too. But it is really easy to find. Um, but like you have that policy in place. And then you have other policies that promote death, like contraception, which in most cases, contraception, especially with the pill, is abortifacients, which means that you're killing your unborn baby um, through a pill. Um, I know some people will think contraception means contraception, like in the logical sense of the term. But if you understand the activations of the pill with the in terms of the chemicals, and then what actually happens with the body of the woman, that's not what happens. And they say it on the box, like they do say this on the box. So uh yeah so mixing it up is going to happen more often when the facilities are even more short staffed because nobody has kids or had kids, right? Like that's the other thing. And so like this is not, so on my channel I've talked about this before. This is absolutely a black pill. Like societal collapse because of population growth is absolutely a black pill. But like with all black pills, there's opportunities to make it a white pill where you can promote the good, right? And by promoting the good, like, there's a very obvious answer to this: have more babies. And what does that entail? Well, that entails sacrifice by the people having those babies that don't want to necessarily like live in a world where there's very few young people able to fill the jobs that are needed to take care of the older people. Um, Again, that's why, like, as an accident of this, I'm very happy I have several kids that later in life, if my wife and I have trouble by how we're raising them, we're not saying you have to, take care of us or whatever, but by just raising decent human beings that believe in God, that later in life, like they'll, just like how it was in the old days, they'll help take care of us. So I've no doubt that will happen if they have to. But like all of this is unfortunately, like, some people will say, well, this is a bug, this is a flaw, this is a mistake that's happening. Like right thinking people, I don't mean that like from a conservative to a left, like a liberal. I mean like right as insane thinking individuals will absolutely come to that conclusion. The problem is I actually think this is more or less on purpose. That contraception is promoted so heavily, that abortion is promoted so heavily, that our rate of births per women who can have children is reduced, primarily because there's too many people in the world in their eyes. If you believe in climate change, now when I say climate change, I'm not denying the climate has changed. I live in Michigan. We have 4 seasons, and there are definitely like changes between those seasons. Even from 5 years ago to today, like it's noticeable. I'm not denying that climate change happens. The influence of people, though, is the point that I have an issue with, based off statistics and the models and everything. Like I'm a statistician, so like that's, of course, like that's what I'm going to look at. But like the problem here is, if as an ideology you have climate change and you agree with this, which most leftists do, liberals, whatever you like, they agree with that. Well, to reduce to maximize the amount of removal of carbon footprint is best done by reducing the amount of humans. And that's what's happening. Like it's no wonder that when you see Planned Parenthood and you're in, after Roe v. Wade, what did they shift to? Like, they shifted to LGBT stuff. They shifted to puberty blockers, right? Like, so like they went from, okay, well, we're removing your kids quite directly to, all right, well, we're going to sterilize them. It's the exact same outcome, right? Like, it's just, you had a kid, he's a tax on society, like, in terms of resources, like he uses resources, but now he can't have kids. So that's good on their end, right? Like, that's what they want. And I say they loosely, like, I don't want to say like people in my family who are leftists completely agree with this. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the people who are in power, like the elites of this movement, know how this calculus works. Like, statistics, statistics is meant to be a like high level understanding of things. And when you start seeing how the numbers fluctuate on a massive scale with millions of people, like, the only real like possibility of you seeing that information outside of the web, like accurate numbers, is if you are in positions of power. If you are not in positions of power, the information that you're given won't necessarily be true. Like, for example, recently the FBI did an edit on crime, and Matt Walsh did a great episode on this. Like, he literally went point by point. He showed the fact checker in the Trump debate fact checking Trump on that crime, according to the FBI, has been reduced by, I think, 2.2%. But then they added, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, silently, a bunch of edits that actually puts that number to be above an increased rate of crime to 4.5%. And so statistics are absolutely important, but they have to be trustworthy. And the people who have the most accurate statistics are those at the top, who have access to those statistics. We have access to the statistics through Google, right? Or other free means. That's not good enough for a lot of this. There's going to be a lot of errors with that. And so like you have, like, even when I've talked about like Kara does a really good job of like the Catholic group from Georgetown. They do it, like, I think they do a great job. The problem is that there's a lot of missing reports, like especially when it comes to those claiming to be Catholic at particular parishes and the total amount of Catholics worldwide, because you have survey results that really do like come at odds with what the final number is based off those tallies. And so like that's incomplete, but like the problem but that's also part of the understanding of statistics, is that you are going to have incomplete data here and there. And so hey Hayes, good day. Thanks for joining us from the Down Under. Some Thanos crap there. I mean, but like in real, like it's almost it's weird, kind of like, yeah, you have Infinity War where it suggests the idea of a snap or the reduction of population. And now we are currently in a situation on a global scale. We're having the threat of a population collapse happen. And so like that movie, like I don't think it was predictive, but like it kind of was, in the sense that it's like suggesting that we're going to just lose a lot of people. And it's not because of wars. It's because we just are choosing not to have kids. We're choosing to prolong our childhood. And it starts with college. When you like, I'm not going to try to make this like super long, like this whole thing super long. But when you say, all right, so there's high school, and at the end of high school, historically, and when I was on the school board, high school is supposed to prepare you for college, or I'm sorry, prepare you for life. I was a school board trustee at 24. I'm 37 now. And so I was like half the age of everyone there. But you'd be surprised at how many of our administration would come out and say, high school is for prepping for college. And it's like, no, it's not. fundamentally, high school is supposed to prepare you for life, not college. But what has happened? A lot of administrators, principals, vice principals, board members, superintendents, excuse me, will push that it's really about the graduation rate and then how many go to college. And then when they go to college, what do they do? What do they do? Well, they're given a check to spend on room and board, and then they typically get a little bit more to use on other things, and that could range from a bunch of things. But for a lot of them, it's to party. A lot of them, it's to do things that, like, I guess they could be free with. And so now we've created an environment that does not reflect reality, does not reflect the world outside of its little bubble. And you have people prolonging their adolescence. And so, like, you have 22-year-olds that fundamentally do not understand like what's expected of them in the workplace, and they're hit hard with that. And some of them adapt, some of them don't. But like, we don't facilitate, like, as much as we say we do not facilitate, like, quite literally growing up like how they should be, to actually prepare them for life. Like, can many of them change a tire? Like, do they care? Like, do they pay attention to their checkbooks? Do they pay attention to the upkeep of their house, of their rentals, anything that's theirs but not theirs? Because, like, most of them also don't own anything. So, like, this all leads to the idea of, like, okay, well, they're being pushed back on adolescence. They're not growing up when they should. They're growing up at 22, maybe 23 instead of 18. And so then you have this, it's basically just this what do you call it, ripple effect into everything else. This is why one of the reasons why marriages get pushed back, one of the reasons why kids then get pushed back. And so they'll have kids when they're like in their 30s, and now what you're doing is you're postponing their ability to actually be a human being with responsibilities. Like, yeah, having a job is great, like, that's responsible. But for a lot of that period, they're paying down a debt that they had to take, that they didn't probably need to take. And once that's paid for, if they ever get it paid off, and once they get a certain amount of income to, like, have a down payment on a house, then they think about having a marriage instead of fooling around. And so, like, it facilitates, again, this is just a ripple effect that happens. Yeah, we're becoming hobbits who are children until 30 without the perks of hobbit culture, right? Like, because we don't. Yeah. And we had to work for 4 days per week in the art. Okay, well, that's awesome. I wish. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other debate. I'm not trying to, like, go into everything, but, like, a lot of this leads into, again, like, this universal view of climate change and this idea of you, with the human element being a problem as opposed to a benefit. And the problem is to reduce, like, to solve it, it's, in their eyes, is to reduce it. That's the natural end, right? Like, when you say remove carbon footprint, okay, well, that doesn't mean have more babies. Like, when I was going to college in 2009, 2010, like, that was understood very clearly then by the liberals that I was friends with in college. Like, that they would bring that up, like, I'm not going to have any kids because X, Y, and Z, climate change. Like, it quite literally, and it just plays out over and over again. Like, you see this playing out over and over and over again. And that's what's frustrating about this. It's, like, simple. If climate change is as, problematic as everyone says it is, and the models don't reflect what's actually happening, but they do, but they don't, and the sun plays a part, but we don't want to say the sun plays a huge part, but we don't want to say it says, it doesn't say any influence at all. And it's like, okay, well, get your crap together. Like, stop basically being, what is it? doomsdayers or apocalyptic people, like the 1800s is filled with that, with like dispensationalists. Like they're saying, oh, the end is coming and yada, yada, yada. And then you've got like that same thing happens, except it's taking it's being done in the form. Like religion isn't as big as it used to be. And so it's manifesting in a secular sense, and it's manifesting in the form of climate change. And it has more permanence about it because we're actually making laws about it. So instead of a dispensationalist coming up and saying the earth is going to be revisited by Jesus in like 1915 or something like that, there's like a bunch, like you could just look up all the different days by prominent preachers. Instead of that happening, we have the world's going to end because of climate change in 5 years. And then that person deletes the tweet 5 years later when the world hasn't ended, or 10 years, or 15 years, or 20 years. Like that's where we are. Like our religion, like our doomsday has not changed in terms of like what people are saying, but they're absolutely applying it in the same way. They're absolutely applying it in the same way. And that's what's dangerous about this. Imagine if dispensationalists had the reins of the American public. Like we would see something similar to what we see today with this doomsday talk of climate change, or this huge blame of climate change, but it would be different because it would be about, obviously it would be about the second coming. And so like there are some nuances that would change, but there would be certain, like based off the predictions, certain things would manifest within policy. And so in this case, climate change is doing that. And one of the things that it's manifesting as is contraception needs to be imposed and promoted in a way that is unhealthy for a population. I mean, it's always unhealthy. So I'm whatever. I'm Catholic. And we can show why it's unhealthy. Abortion is promoted at the youngest. Like I knew a girl in 2002. She was 17. And at that time, okay, 2002, long time ago, 22 years ago. I feel old now. In 2002, she had already had 2 abortions at 17. She was in my algebra class. Like that was a problem then. It's a problem now, except now the number is higher. Like the average woman who has an abortion has more now. And it's like, and part of that is because our population hasn't changed, but our abortions have gone up in relation to our population. And so like now it's like it's a proportional thing. It's not a total thing. But like we have serious problems with like quite literally just having kids. And the fact that like it's no surprise that both parties are talking about it in some way, right? Like we have Tim Walz and Minnesota allowing, you quite literally Google this. Like it doesn't take long to do this. Google the law that they were debating about between the Vance, JD Vance's and Tim Walz debate. It allows for having the baby and letting it sit there. And since the law has been enacted, or I'm sorry, since 2019, that's happened 8 times from 2019 to 2021. But since 2021, they've actually made it harder to like record that information because they want to hide it. Like, of course they want to hide it because that's murder. But on the other side, like Republicans, they have the right intention. They want to have more kids and promote more kids. They're using an absolutely terrible method, which is IVF, because it creates it makes the human person a commodity that you can buy and sell. You're separating sex from the procreative act, and that's wrong. But more so for all you people who are watching this for the practical reasons, buying and selling humans is wrong. We know that's wrong for slavery. We know that's wrong for this, because you essentially make those fertilized eggs, which are human beings, according to science, they are slaves, and they're either going to be frozen, sacrificed when they're attempted to lodge themselves within the woman, or they're going to become a baby. Those are the three options. And so they're not good. Like, only one of them has an outcome of living, and it's not even it's not even a good chance. And that's again a real problem. How many in the end of the world? Yeah, we've survived quite a bit. Quite a bit. So let's see how many people. So as you can probably tell, I'm more on X now, but yeah, this is way more, like, way off what I typically do. I typically do like Catholic stuff, Catholic statistics. And in this one, I'm very, very much hitting the practical aspects of what's happened in the world with child-free mentalities. Excuse me. And how that's been playing out in different parts. A lot of these statistics are just not hard to find, and I'm sorry I don't have them all to present, because I would love to do that. I did kind of do this in a rush, and today's kind of been hectic. So I apologize for not having the information right here for you, but it is absolutely there. And if you want to show me up that I'm wrong, please do so in the comments section and correct me, because I am not infallible. I do not have the ability to say truth 100% of the time. And sometimes, my memory sucks. So not always. Most of the time, my memory's pretty good. But I just got done looking at a lot of these statistics, so it's pretty fresh in my mind. But again, if you find a problem with it, please put it down. Second note I want to point out is I did get accepted by Subscribestar. So now I have a subscription there, and you can find that link in the description. And that'll help with paying for the ability to live stream, or to an alternative to live streaming. But there's also the option to help me with getting data pulls to do a better video on information I do not have access to without paying money for. And so there's a lot of that. Like an example that I use for that is how many ordinations across all the dioceses for like the last 20 years. That's a really important statistic. Like, to look at all, I think it's 176 dioceses of the Latin Rite in America, and seeing which ones have utterly failed and done okay and have been phenomenal on given their populations. Because that's, I mean, we need to look at that information. We need to see like what exactly is happening as the lady. Why? Because it adds urgency. It adds urgency and focus for the areas that need focus in the body. And so the body of Christ, we need to help. Like, small tangent, but like, the bishops are overwhelmed. Like, yeah, you can have a quibble about who's a good bishop, who's a bad bishop, but generally speaking, bishops are just overwhelmed, just like priests. And they have a lot of administration, it's administrative duties. And being able to present information like that is really important. And to a certain extent, Kara does do that. But like, for you and me, like, we don't necessarily have a grasp of how bad it is, right? Like, we don't have statistics to give tangibility to what we experience at Mass. Like, when we see so many people at one particular Mass, because 2 parishes closed down, right? Like, the closings happen left and right in the United States, and it's a real problem. And so it's a matter of addressing that in a way that the average person can understand it and then act on it. So besides that, I don't really have much to say. I just wanted to bring this up because I'm kind of sick of all the people who talk about it, but then like do not explain in fuller detail the core problem, which is this mentality to, I mean, like this idea that we don't care about our society's birth rate, and we absolutely should. So, so I second what Elon Musk says, and hopefully this has been helpful in that capacity. So, yeah, thank you for watching, and have a great day.